The first thing I noticed was the flashing blue lights reflecting off my garage door. For a split second, I thought something serious had happened somewhere. Maybe a break-in, maybe an accident. But then I looked outside and realized the police cars weren't stopping. They were stopping right in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out, while half the neighborhood suddenly became very interested. In their windows, cracked open, moved. Phones quietly appeared in people's hands. In a quiet HOA neighborhood like ours, police cars are basically the evening entertainment. And the craziest part, the reason they were there had nothing to do with crime. No theft, no disturbance. No emergency, apparently. The police had been called because I refused to lend my car to someone. Not just anyone, though, Karen. Karen, our neighborhood self-appointed queen. The woman who carried her HOA clipboard like it was a badge of authority. The one who believed every driveway, lawn, and mailbox somehow fell under her personal command. And somehow, my simple no had escalated all the way to flashing police lights. If you've ever lived in an HOA neighborhood, you probably know the type. There's always that one person who treats the rule book like a crown, and the rest of us like subjects. In our neighborhood, that person was Karen. Karen wasn't technically the president of the HOA, but you'd never know it by the way she acted. She walked the streets every afternoon with a clipboard tucked under her arm, like some kind of suburban sheriff, sandals slapping the pavement, sunglasses perched on her nose, scanning every driveway and lawn as if she were conducting a military inspection. Can a trash left out too long? Karen noticed grass half an inch too tall. Karen noticed someone parked a little too close to the curb. Oh, Karen definitely noticed. And she loved the notices. Little warning letters slipped into mailboxes, printed in bold like they were official court documents. Most people didn't even argue anymore. They just nodded, apologized, and fixed whatever tiny violation she had invented that week because, honestly, it was easier than dealing with her. Karen thrived on that the moment someone pushed back. She'd lean harder, quoting HOA rules like sacred law in her mind. Those rules didn't just organize the neighborhood, they gave her power. The difference was that most people eventually learned to stay quiet. I didn't. That whole situation really started the day I brought the car home. Not just any car, but the one thing I had been quietly working toward for years. A deep metallic, black Camaro that looked like it had been carved out of shadow and chrome. The kind of car that didn't just sit in a driveway. It owned the space around it. Getting that car wasn't some impulse purchase. I had worked for it extra shifts. Skipped trips more nights eating cheap takeout than I'd like. To admit every dollar that could be saved went toward that goal. So when I finally turned into my driveway that afternoon, engine humming low and smooth, it felt like a small personal victory. I parked carefully, stepped out, and for a moment just stood there looking at it. You know that quiet kind of pride you feel when something represents years of effort finally paying off. That was the moment, and of course, Karen saw it. I noticed her almost immediately. She had appeared across the street like she'd been summoned by the sound of the engine, arms folded, visor tilted down, studying the car the way someone might inspect a suspicious package. Then she walked over with that thin, tight smile she used whenever she was pretending to be friendly. Well, she said slowly, glancing over the Camaro's curves. That's quite a flashy car for this neighborhood. It sounded like a compliment, but the tone not even close. I laughed it off at the time, but the way she kept staring at that car told me something was already forming in her mind. The next afternoon, Karen showed up at my front door. That alone was unusual. Karen didn't usually visit people unless there was a complaint involved. When I opened the door, she was standing there with a plastic tray of store-bought cookies, the kind you grab last minute at the grocery store. Her smile was wide, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, hello, neighbor," she said in a syrupy voice. "I just wanted to stop by and welcome your beautiful new vehicle to the community." I leaned against the doorframe. Already suspicious, Karen didn't do friendly gestures. Not without a reason. She held out the cookies like a peace offering. I took them, thanked her, and waited. Because with Karen, there was always a second act. Sure enough, after a few seconds of awkward, small talk about the weather and the neighborhood, she finally said it. "My son has prom next weekend," she explained casually, and he was hoping to make a memorable entrance. "When I saw your car yesterday, I immediately thought how perfect it would be. I blinked, you mean? She nodded like the idea was completely reasonable. You could lend it to him for the evening. For a moment, I genuinely thought she was joking. But she wasn't. I shook my head and said the only answer that made sense. Sorry, Karen, that's not happening. Her smile disappeared instantly like someone flipped a switch. Well, she said sharply, neighbors are supposed to support each other. Refusing a simple request like that shows a real lack of community spirit. I didn't budge, and judging by the glare she gave me before storming off my porch, the war had officially started. Karen didn't come back the next day or the day after that. For a brief moment, I almost thought she had accepted the answer and moved on. That illusion lasted about 4 days. The first letter appeared in my mailbox on bright white HOA lettered in bold, like it had come from a courthouse instead of someone's home printer. According to the notice, I was in violation of something called improper vehicle display. I stood there reading it twice, trying to figure out what that even meant. Apparently, parking my car in my own driveway at a highly visible angle was considered disruptive to the neighborhood aesthetic. I laughed and tossed it on the counter. Then another letter arrived the next morning. This one cited lack of community cooperation. The following day, a third notice. Disturbing neighborhood harmony. Each violation carried a small fine, $20 here, $30 there. Nothing massive on its own, but the pattern was obvious. Every day, another envelope showed up, and every day, the total quietly climbed higher. Karen was trying to squeeze me. Her logic was simple eventually. The annoyance, the letters, and the growing stack of fake fines would wear me down. At some point, I'd get tired of the nonsense, hand over the keys, and the problem would magically disappear. But I never responded instead. I kept every single letter neatly stacked, dated, filed away. Because deep down, I had a feeling Karen wasn't going to stop at petty paperwork. And when someone like her keeps escalating, sooner or later, they push things far enough that everyone else finally sees it too. The flashing lights outside my house were the final act of Karen's little campaign. By the time I stepped out onto the driveway, she was already standing there with her arms crossed like a general, waiting for backup. The police cruiser doors opened and 2 officers stepped out, while half the neighborhood quietly watched from porches and windows. Karen practically sprinted toward them. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she said, waving her clipboard like it was evidence in a courtroom. "This resident has repeatedly refused to comply with HOA authority and has accumulated numerous violations." The officers looked from her to me, clearly trying to understand why they'd been called. I walked over calmly, no rush. "No panic," one officer asked, "sir. What seems to be the issue here?" Before Karen could jump in again, I pulled out the folder I've been keeping inside the house. Every warning letter, every fine, every ridiculous violation notice she had sent me was neatly organized inside. I handed it over, then I explained the entire situation, including the part where she had asked to borrow my car for her son's prom and how all of this had started. After I said no, the officers flipped through the pages, exchanging a look that said everything. Finally, one of them turned back to Karen. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "HOA disputes aren't criminal matters. Calling the police over, this is considered misuse of emergency services." Karen's confidence evaporated as the officer pulled out his citation book. For the first time since I'd met her, Karen looked completely speechless. The moment the officer started writing the citation, the mood in the street changed instantly. Up until then, everyone had been watching quietly, pretending they were just casually outside. But the second Karen realized she was the one getting in trouble, you could hear the whispers spreading across the driveway and sidewalks. A couple of neighbors couldn't even hide their laughter. Someone across the street actually lifted their phone and started recording. Karen noticed, and the color in her face shifted from red to something closer to panic. "This is ridiculous.